Hi guys, it's Amanda, and today we're looking at book-to-movie adaptations. Recently there's been a huge boom in the number of book-to-movie adaptations that are both being released and announced. We've already had City of Bones and Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters released recently. Of course, we've all been waiting and really excited for the Divergent movie, Catching Fire, Vampire Academy, and recently they've also released news about the Fallen movie, and John Green has started talks about releasing The Fault in Our Stars as a movie as well. So with all these movies coming out, I thought it would be a good time to look back at some of the book-to-movie adaptations that have been released, and look at the really good ones and look at the not-so-good ones. But book-to-movie adaptations really got big again when two book franchises were turned into movies and made millions and millions of dollars. The first one, of course, being Harry Potter. This was a brilliant adaptation of a book which was just doing wonderfully, and then they made such a great movie out of it. The first three movies I really enjoyed, but after that I felt that they started not being quite so good anymore, and that was a shame. I still preferred the books throughout most of this series, but the movies did a very good job when you consider that they only had a couple of hours to tell what a book says in a couple of hundred pages, so you miss out a lot of the details, and they are having to cut some of the plot. The Harry Potter franchise, however, has been around for ages, so we can't really be blaming them for creating this huge interest in book-to-movie adaptations. The second huge franchise which has really started this going again was the Twilight franchise. Personally, I hated the movie, and I must admit I do quite enjoy the book. In this case, the problem was most of the action happens in Bella's head. Like, most of the romance, most of the things that makes this book so enjoyable happen in Bella's head. So when you go into the movie and all of a sudden that's all missing, it all seems a little bit shallow and just a little bit flat. Also, I feel the need to mention this every time I bring up this movie. It feels like they've basically just filmed it with a piece of blue cellophane over the camera for the entire time. Admittedly, they do get better. Which brings us to Breaking Dawn. Breaking Dawn Part 2 I thought was a really good book-to-movie adaptation. They fixed the huge problem that the Breaking Dawn has, in as much as the ending is really anticlimactic, whereas they changed that in the movie, and the movie is a hell of a lot better in that respect than the book. I never really enjoyed this book quite as much as some of the others in this series, and I think the movies just continuously got better and better, so it's not surprising that I might not value the book as highly as the movie in this instance. Breaking Dawn was an instance where changing the plot actually worked in the favour of the book. Although writing books and making movies are completely different art forms and therefore require different things within them, people seem to expect the movie to be an exact replica of the book, and I know that's not going to happen. However, sometimes they don't change it quite so well. Case in point, Beastly by Alex Flynn. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a really great retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and it worked. I think she did a really good job of modernising the tale and yet still keeping the magic that is in the original fairy tale. I don't know quite what they were thinking when they did the movie. I mean, they've got all the petty things, like the fact that in the book the girl is a redhead, and in the movie it's Vanessa Hudgens, who's got a completely different look. But then you go on to the fact that in the book he turns into a ferocious beast, whereas in the movie they change it so he becomes tattooed, scarred and bald. I do understand why they might have had to do that, however, because creating a realistic beast that would still be able to blend in a live-action film might have been a bit tricky. I know in a movie they're going to have to cut out bits of the plot when they're adapting from a book, because the book has got so much longer to tell the story and the movie needs to be very quick. However, the one thing you should never do when cutting sections out of the plot is cut out the climax of the story. They got rid of the big ending scene, which kind of turned the whole movie flat. However, now I've shown you all these times when movies have done it really wrong, I think it's only fair to show you the instances where they do it really right. One of the best book-to-movie adaptations I've seen is The Time Traveler's Wife. I think this was done really well. They had to cut some bits out of the book, so the book was still better, in my opinion. But the movie was beautiful, it was gorgeous, and I actually watched the movie first in this instance. The book was very confusing at first because of all the time travel. I got confused as to where in the story I was, and I sort of lost it at points. The movie, however, managed to keep a timeline sort of going throughout the story so you actually understand it a little bit better. The movie did a very good job of managing to capture the essence of the story in a much shorter time frame, and in this case the movie actually let me enjoy the book more, and I'm very glad that I saw it. One set of books that seems to always have movie adaptations coming out is classics, and Because of the flowery language of classics, I often find that I enjoy the movies better. One classic that they made a movie of that I actually went and read the book afterwards because I loved the movie so much and still enjoyed the book was The Princess Bride. You've got to love a book that claims itself as a classic before it's written. The book is really, really good, but it does have these long extended sections where you're out of the story and sort of a framing narratives going on, which I found really, really dull and I struggled to get through. The movie managed to still capture the narration that was going on through the framing narrative. However, it manages to do it in, I think, a much more charming way with a grandfather reading to his sick grandson. You still get all the annotations made in this book, but you don't have the boring story about a husband and a starlet and all this weird stuff which I struggled to get through. And if I hadn't watched the movie beforehand, I would never have quite got through the dull bit in the beginning because I would have assumed that the whole story was like that and it would have been awful. But so in this case, the movie managed to get all the magic out of this book and it cut all the crappy stuff. The final movie that I've got is probably going to be a little bit controversial because I know a lot of people who read the book really loved it and were therefore really disappointed with the movie, because in this case the movie and the book are completely unrelated basically, and that is Ella Enchanted. I really, really, really love this movie. I think it's really charming and it's fairy tale-esque but with a modern touch, and it does it really, really well. But all my favourite parts about this movie are not in the book at all. I read the book and I was kind of unimpressed. I found that while it was enjoyable enough, it was kind of sort of ho-hum and just another retelling of Cinderella. The scenery they had in there was fantastically clever. I found the prince being like the teen heartthrob and then having malls and magazines sort of made in a medieval sort of way. I found was really enjoyable. Also, while in the book you had sort of your ogres that were evil, your giants which, you know, big, and your elves which were the mysterious creatures that no one really saw. In the movie you've got ogres which are misunderstood and being blamed for the death of the king. You've got giants that have been enslaved and elves that are being forced to work in show business. I thought this was a great touch. I found that they managed to put a lot more political sort of ideas into this movie and therefore it had a greater idea than the book ever had. I found that the movie in this case was a hell of a lot better than the book. It's one of my favourite movies. The one thing I must say I can understand why people didn't like is they completely changed the plot line. In the movie, the main character that drives the plot is the evil King Edgar, of course the prince's uncle. However, in the book, the prince's father's still alive and Edgar doesn't exist at all. So you sort of lose that whole entire plot. Do you agree with my choices or do you think I'm completely wrong? What movies do you think actually might have been better than the books that they first came from? Let me know down in the comments. Also, if you haven't heard, I'm hosting a giveaway. I'll leave the link down in the description box. It will close on October the 8th, so make sure you enter before then. That's it from me. I'll see you next time. Bye guys!